What's up guys, this is Bunny Muffins. If you hate all the reroll comps, well I got a comp for you to like kind of destroy all of them. So we are going to be playing Hellion. So contrary to popular belief, you do not reroll Hellions. This was a popular strategy at the very start of set 5, but since then, people have found a much better way to play them, which is just play Hellions and then just play normal after that. So this comp reaches its true power once you hit Teemo. And because of that, this composition has one of the highest caps in the game. So it is like one of the best late game comps ever. And this guide will walk you through how to navigate the early and mid game to reach Teemo and how to play the comp once you hit him. So here is a sample level 8 composition with Teemo. We have all the Hellions in the back line. We got the Static Shiv on the Lulu, we got the Jeweled Gauntlet on the Teemo, and then we got our Kennen with GA Morello in the front, along with a Volibear Ivern combination because, well, they're just so dang strong. So this comp actually revolves around Morello Kennen with tank items, and then you Static Shiv Ziggs in the early to mid game, and then you put all other damage items on your Ziggs until you reach the mid game of 5 Hellion. And then once you get to level 9, you sell your Ziggs, put all your items on everyone else, and just win the game through Teemo and Heimerdinger. If you didn't end up getting enough items for Teemo, just throw the Static Shiv on him because he's really good with that too. So let's go over the leveling pattern because this is really important. So for level 4, you want to reach that right after the neutral rounds on stage 2-1. But the thing is, you only do this if you hit your 2-star Hellions naturally. If you don't have your 2-star Hellions yet, just don't level up quite yet and just level up naturally. So for level 5, you want to hit that on stage 2-5 with 10 gold, or on 3-1 if you are lose streaking. Next for level 6, you want to level up at stage 3-2 and keep at least 30 gold. But you can also roll a bit for 5 Hellions if you are close to hitting them, or for a few extra synergy units for the Hellion units. For example, if you have a Kennen, maybe you could play 3 Skirmishers and 3 Hellion. If you have a Poppy, you could add a Knight in here and there, or like a Spellweaver with Ziggs. On to level 7, you hit this on stage 4-1, and then you roll a bit until you are stabilized. And then level 8, this is on 4-5 if you properly manage your econ. You can roll down here if you want, if you have upgrades to look for. And if you are low HP, you definitely need to roll down now because you need to buy Teemo ASAP, and sometimes it's a game of whether you hit him or not. On to level 9, if you found Teemo early on 8 or naturaled most of your units, like you could have a pretty high econ during stage 4. Just keep in mind, you want to roll as much gold as you can on level 9 because this is the time where you get the highest chance for legendary units. Now let's go on to the strengths and weaknesses of this composition. So first off, very strong late game as we talked about before. Like it's probably one of the best ones that you can get. The comp is also very cheap in the early to mid game. And then there's a pretty flexible amount of itemizations you can use in the late game because Heimer, Teemo, Volibear, all those late game bombs, they can use all sorts of different stuff. Now onto the weaknesses. First off, it's like this comp is really reliant on hitting Teemo. Luckily, Teemo 1 is good enough to stabilize. You don't need Teemo 2, even though it is a very welcome upgrade. Next, you do need to get a very strong start. Like win streak starts are really popular with Hellions because you want good items to stay healthy without rolling too much in the early and mid game in order to reach level 8 and level 9 that much faster. So now onto the items. So the 2 key early game items are Morellonomicon and Guardian Angel. However, the shadow versions are a little better than the regular ones. So with that in mind, the shadow items you want to consider taking are Shadow Bow, Shadow Tear, Belt, Rod, Sword, and Chain. Those are really the only ones you care about. So onto Kennen items, the best in slots are the More Evil Nomicon and the Fallen Guardian Angel. So these are built from Rod, Belt, Sword, and Chain. And Morello just is a great win streak item. Guardian Angel, it's just like a Kennen item because he gets a free ult off of it. And some substitutes you can use are Gargoyle Stoneplate of Immortality or regular Gargoyle Stoneplate. Warmox is decent on Kennen, Frozen Heart's pretty good on him, and then Titan's Resolve and ZZ Rot are like last-ditch items that you could also put on Kennen. Next up, we have Ziggs items. So best in slot Ziggs is Static Stiletto and Static Shiv. This is like the best item when paired with the Morellonomicon on Kennen. It's just like super turbo win streaking. It slowly whittles down the enemy teams, both from the Static Shiv procs and from the Morello burn. And after that, you could round this off with either Jeweled Gauntlet, Guinsoo's Rage Blade, Rabadon's Caustic Death Cap, or regular Death Cap, Hand of Vengeance, Evil Giant Slayer, or regular Giant Slayer. And then Blue Buff and Spear of Shojin are also pretty good on Ziggs because Spear of Shojin, you'll transfer that onto Heimerdinger. Blue Buff, you could transfer onto Teemo later in the game. Now for defensive items, you don't really need defensive items on Ziggs, but if you are forced to make them, Guardian Angel's pretty good and Trap Claw's also pretty decent. For support items, Chalice of Malice or Chalice of Power are both really good. because they use a lot of cloaks in this composition. Cloak isn't really something that you want, so if you have a cloak, build a chalice. After that, Zeke's Herald's pretty decent if you have a lot of swords, because you don't need that many swords in this comp. And those are just like the 2 support items you use. For utility, you have the standard Zephyr, Shot of Stillness. Those are always going to be good. And then for spatula items, Hellion Spat is made from spatula and bow, with one of them being a shadow version. And this gives you access to 7 Hellions, or you could drop a Hellion unit to fit a slot for a better unit. So this is great on Heimerdinger. He makes great use of the attack speed, and you could use it on Ivern if you don't have Heimerdinger yet. Last thing you could do is Revenant Spatula. So Revenant serves as a Guardian Angel with damage amp on Revive on Heimerdinger or Teemo, and it is really good for them there. So with that in mind, carousel priority, you're going to be wanting the Rod first, then the Tear, then the Belt. And then after that, there's a drop off. After that, you want Chain, Sword, Bow, and then you just don't want Glove or Cloak. For the early game, so as stated before in the intro, Morello, Kennen, and Static Shiv Ziggs are the core to the build. So if you are able to get the Hellion opener, definitely aim for those items. Itemization past this is super flexible. It's like you can pretty much go anything that we talked about before. Just make whatever items you can to preserve health and win streak. After you get the 3 Hellion units, you want to be running either Spellweaver or a synergy from a random Hellion unit as you level up to level 4 and level 5. So you could do like, to pair up with Kled, you could run Hecarim, Sejuani, or like REROLL during stage 3. Poppy is good with Taric, Thresh, Nautilus, and Leona, and then Lulu is obviously great with Kindred, Lux, Ryze, and Morgana. For Spellweaver, it depends on the stage of the game, but in the early stages, Brand is good if you do not have Morello or Shiv yet, because he does a lot of damage in the early game. If you already do have those items, I like using Victor more because he provides more support than Brand to keep your Hellions alive for longer. In the mid game, Victor 2-star helps keep your Hellions alive, and then Zyra is great if you don't have 2-star Victor yet, because Zyra CC is better than a 1-star Victor. During stage 4, Zyra 2-star should be the one that's preferred, and then you only really play Vel'Koz if you do not have a Zyra 2, because Vel'Koz 1 is slightly better than Zyra 2. Another random substitution you can make is a random Ivern. If you find this unit, you can consider running him for more frontline and CC if you already have Morello and Shiv. So some alternative openers, because I know like we can't always get Hellions, right? If we have Kled, we could run like a Cavalier start. So we could do Hecarim, Kled, Ziggs, and Brand as we see here. Hecarim and Brand can hold the Morello pretty reasonably before you get Kennen, and you can transition this into a Hellion board pretty easily once you get it. Next up, we have Leona, Poppy, Vayne, and Varus. This is a Ranger Knight combination. So Rangers, Varus is obviously a great holder of the Shiv. And then of course with the Poppy, you could add in the Hellions as you get them. The last version we're going to go into is the Skirmisher start. This is with Kennen, Trundle, and Pantheon. Obviously it's pretty hard to hit this. You could also use Udyr, but if you get the Skirmisher start, go ahead and use it and then add in Hellions later. Now onto the mid game. So this is going to be stage 3 and stage 4. We're obviously going to cover stage 3 first. So during stage 3, you will want to have some sort of 5 Hellion on your board, especially before stage 4. So at 3-2, you can consider rolling for this, especially if you're sitting on a lot of pairs. And make sure you have at least one defensive item on Kennen during this time when you're at like the armory or the carousel. So here's a sample board on 3-2. We have the Kennen, Kled, Poppy, Lulu, and Ziggs as like the 5 Hellion, and then we just added a random Cavalier. Obviously, REROLL is going to be the best one. You don't always get that, so feel free to use Sejuani or Hecarim as needed. If you are unable to get the 5 Hellion board, you could just run other units. So for example, if you can't find Lulu, you could add in more Cavaliers. You could also add in a Spellweaver or a Knight, as we talked about before. On stage 4, you are going to need to roll a lot to stabilize at this point, because your team is very strong because there are a lot of 1 and 2 cost units that you most likely 2-star during stage 2. However, once you get to stage 4, they don't cut it anymore. So you need to roll a little bit here. And keep in mind, you most likely will not hit Teemo at this point in the game because level 7 is very low odds. But you could find random 4 costs to put in just temporarily until you are at that next stage, along with 2-starring all of your Hellions. Here is a sample board on stage 4-5. You could also run a random Ivern here if you want, but we have Taric for Knights, REROLL, and then the 5 Hellions with Spellweaver in the back. In the late game, this is going to be a sample level 8 composition. So we have 5 Hellion with Teemo. We sold the Ziggs to put the Teemo in. We put in Ivern for Invoker. And then, of course, we want the Heimerdinger Volibear combo, but you don't always get every legendary you want. So right now we have Cavalier and Mystic with REROLL and Lux added in. As you get the better units, replace them first. But this is like a typical board that you could usually hit if you're able to find Teemo. So again, you're going to be slowly replacing your team over time as you hit the upgrades. So you want to do it in this priority with Heimerdinger as the most important, Kindred, and then Lux. And then for your front line, Volibear and Garen are both really good, and then they would eventually replace Rel, who is on your board right now. So if you do manage to hit Karma 2 and Syndra 2-star, you could also replace Kled and Poppy to run 4 Invoker instead. 4 Invoker is like a classic composition that is really, really strong in the late game, and here's what that board would look like here. We have the Kennen and Volibear in front, and then we have the 4 Invokers in the back with the Heimerdinger. If you want another board with like more Mystic focus, we have Ryze, Kindred in this version with Teemo, Heimerdinger, and Lulu in the back line, and then of course Volibear and Kennen in the front line. And if you are facing a lot of attack damage, feel free to run Rel with like a Nautilus, because those are going to be pretty good tanks as well. You could add in Knights from the Nautilus plus the Poppy, or Nautilus plus a Garen. Do note that putting in Ironclad is pretty rare. You only do it if you are like in a 1v1 scenario against an attack damage team. The last comp we're going to go over is like the turbo capped comp, and this is just like a 4 Invoker comp, similar to what we saw before, but with a Garen with the Kennen items instead. And I don't even think we are running Hellion here. It's just like a very good style to play if you have like items for Heimer and Teemo, and if they are 2-star. So now that we know how to play, let's go into positioning. So Assassins are a very difficult matchup, but it's winnable if you hit your capped comp. So what you want to do against Assassin is position your fodder units in front of your carries, such as Kennen, Lulu, Ivern, and Kindred, and then you will be able to CC them with these units and get death immunity from Kindred, because like Kindred just puts up her anti-death zone, and that is really good against Assassins. If you're fighting a Katarina player, swap your Teemo 1 hex towards the center so that Katarina does not target him. So in this board up here, we could swap Teemo and Syndra, or you could use the Baby Dragon, so one of those two gets hit by the Assassins instead. Against backline carries such as Kayle, Draven, Aphelios, and Karma, you want to position on the far side of them. So if you're facing a Draven, go as far as possible, and then Lulu and Ivern can deal pretty well with Dianas and Viegos that these comps typically run. So if you're facing them a lot, you could use a similar position that we use against Assassins, just so you could take care of their Dianas as well. If no one's running an Assassin, just go ahead and frontline your Ivern. Against Vel'Koz, you want to have your Volibear on the opposite side of your Teemo, and the reason why you want to do this is because either Teemo will be on the correct side and not hit by the Vel'Koz ultimate, or if he is going to hit your Teemo, Volibear will be there to interrupt the Vel'Koz. So it's kind of like if you want to hedge your bets, you kind of do that positioning. You also want to avoid the left side into Abomination players, because if you are on the left, Sion comes running at your Teemo and interrupts him pretty quickly. Against Set, place your Kennen 1 hex to the left of being cornered so that Set does not one-shot your back line. Syndra is also really good into Set because she throws Set away from your carries, and therefore if you're running like the Invoker comp, Syndra needs to be on the same side as Set. If you do not have a Syndra, you want to position on the opposite side of Set. So in the mirror matchup, if you're facing like Hellion versus Hellion, scatter your units so you don't get AoE'd too much by the Teemo and the Kennen. And Invokers do have an advantage in the matchup, so if you are able to go to the 4 Invoker build, definitely try to do that. Place Volibear in front of their Teemo if possible, and your Heimer turret. So if Heimer is not your main carry, you can use Heimer turret as an Assassin fodder or Thresh fodder. If neither of these are needed, aim to position your turret opposite the enemy champion. After all that positioning is done, let's talk about what to do if you are contested and how you should pivot. So if you don't hit a Teemo but you hit a Heimerdinger, you're not really that concerned because you could just play around Heimerdinger as the primary item holder, as they share a lot of similar items. If you have a blue buff, you could pivot into stuff like Karma, and if you have a Shojin, you could pivot into stuff like Vel'Koz in the early to mid game. However, these pivots are pretty difficult to pull off, so just be careful about doing that. Now for just some like random tips for you guys. If you are positioning against enemy Kennens, this is something you can do. If you have 2 range units to surround your Ziggs in the early game, you can position like this so that the enemy Kennen will not reach your Ziggs, and Ziggs essentially just won't be stunned. Alternatively, you could position your Ziggs near side to their Kennen and put a bait unit on the other side so that the Kennen chases the bait unit instead of going onto your Ziggs. If you are interested in looking for the full guide, I have it all on my website, bunnymuffins.lol. This was made by our coach on the Discord and our website. He's like a frequent challenger player, and if you are interested in learning more from him, definitely sign up for the coaching on the website or just like in the Discord as well. But that's pretty much it for me today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the guide on Hellion. I, for one, like playing this comp because everyone's going for the reroll comps, and this one is kind of like something of like a breath of fresh air, in my opinion. So if that is something of interest to you, definitely like play this comp a lot. But yeah, that's it for me today. Hit the like button below and subscribe if you are not already, and check out all the links in the description because you could have access to like my Twitter, Instagram, and all that other good stuff. But that is it from me today. I will see you guys later. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe. And of course, smash that like button. Each like is an LP I gain before the next video.